Can you all hear me? Can you hear me? Oh, okay. So today, I will teach you a new statue from the Good Deeds. So we've had several days of teaching, but haven't been able to go through many teachings of the Good Deeds. So there's no choice but to start one today. So I'm going to say, yes, I'm really going to do one today. Now the autobiographical versus good deeds. I'll speak about the fourth of the good deeds. And the text of the and the actual text of this has a main part of the text has too many parts. And so the first of these is the preliminaries, how to eat, enter the Dharma. And this has 6 points. And so this is the fourth of those 6 points. What the fourth is abandoning meaningless distractions. And the root text reads, when I developed certainty from the bottom of my heart that ordinary distractions are merely ways to waste this life, I cast away all commonplace diversions. My awareness became clear. I found conviction in the jewels. I think of this as one of my good deeds. I don't need to go through the words right through each and every word. So in general, within Mikyo Dorje's collected works, there is an instruction and training on the liberation stories of Mikyo Dorje. And so there's instructions on training and liberation stories. I thought I'd give a citation or a quotation from that text. Now, what he said there is, one must follow the Guru without ever being separate from them. How long must one follow the Guru? Until you achieve in Buddha, you must follow to the Guru. But in order to follow the Guru in that way, you must have the fortune to be in a time and place similar to the Guru's, the spiritual friends, and a body and mind of the same kind. Once you have achieved that superior basis, you must be free of obstacles and have the favorable conditions that permit following the Guru and the Dharma. That depends upon gathering virtuous karma for that sake, such as having faith in the Guru and the true Dharma, and on diligence, mindfulness, samadhi, and prajna. Therefore, you must eliminate the impediments to virtue, the conditions that create afflictions, the places and friends that are especially pleasant and unpleasant, that are especially pleasant or unpleasant, the cognitions that want, crave for, or hate those. If you can eliminate ordinary distractions for such purposes and distractions of thinking about the methods for greatness in this life, and then find solidity of body, speech, and mind, your mind will become workable and your awareness will come clear. Prajna will ripen and you will remember the qualities of the three jewels. When you remember that, you will feel that if you use your body and speech and mind for pointless acts for even an instant, it is even more precious than your life. Practice that one-pointedly with that feeling. So when we want to follow the gurus, we should never separate them from them until we achieve, or we need to follow them without being separate until we achieve Buddhahood. If we just follow them for a few days or a few months or a few years, that is enough. So you need to follow the spiritual friend until you achieve Buddhahood. And in order to follow that guru, what you need is merit. You need to have the same merit, the same fortune to be able to follow the spiritual friend, to receive Dharma teachings from the spiritual friend, or to practice. We need to have the special basis of a body and mind. And so what that is the in order for that, we must gather the accumulations, right? The main reason why we say that the precious human body with its leisures and resources is so precious, because on that basis, we have all the things that we need, all the favorable conditions we need to practice the Dharma. And so that is why the human body with the leisures and resources is so important. Otherwise, just merely having human body is not necessarily an actual precious human body with leisure and resources. So, whether we have a human body with the leisures and resources or not depends upon whether we're able to find the teachings from an authentic spiritual friend and whether we are able to practice them. And while we are practicing virtue through listening, contemplating, and meditating, then the impediments, or what obstructs that, there are many adverse circumstances to that, many of them. But among all the different but the worst of all these innumerable adversities is the afflictions within our own being. It's our thoughts of greed and hatred. So if we need to overcome obstacles, then we don't need to think about doing repulsing obstructions or giving torments to something outside. We need to see if we are able to eliminate all of the afflicted thoughts within our minds. And we have within ourselves, we have the imprints that lead to the thoughts of attachment and aversion. And because we have them within that, we also have all the distractions of this life, the thoughts of we have many plans to become great in this life. We have a lot of things, and all of these are fooling us. And so all of these worldly distractions, we must see how much can we distance ourselves from those worldly distractions. With our body, we can see, can we stay in a solitary place? And with our speech, we shouldn't say lots of meaningless things instead, but remain silent. But we also need to see, instead of our mind getting distracted, can our minds rest peacefully? And if we do that, then eventually our mind can be used in a virtuous way and will go in the virtuous direction. Our awareness, or our mind, will become clear. Our intelligence will increase. Our faith in the three jewels will grow stronger. And so for these reasons, if we use our body, speech, and mind for pointless things, or for the eight worldly concerns, then that is just a total loss. And so for that, we need to see if we can use our body, speech, and mind to give our human life meaning and to practice the true Dharma. And so Mikyo Dorje himself, in his own life, as I have explained before, was never fooled by the things of these days. And what is the example of how he did this? During the time of Mikyo Dorje, there was the king of Zhang. And so at that time, he ruled over many, had power over many regions of Kham. And so the king of Zhang was at that time very powerful. And so he invited Mikyo Dorje. And he followed him as his root guru, as his primary guru. And likewise, the Ming Emperor Zhengde, also called Qingguo, but the Ming Emperor Zhengde, in particular, sent messengers and an incredible and an unconceivable amount of offerings, and a letter inviting him to Mikyo Dorje to come to China. And at that time, many great people, great gurus, regarded Mikyo Dorje very high and respected him greatly. Likewise, the Karmapa's Great Encampment, which is named the Ornament of the World, was probably the most influential organization in Tibet at that time. And Karma Kagyu Lamas, monasteries and so forth, filled all areas of Tibet. And so they were very powerful, both in terms of Dharma and in terms of politics. And the Karmapa was considered by the Tibetans foremost, but also by many other lamas, was considered as a great lama who they could all have faith in. And this is a good situation, or a fine situation, you could say, but Mikyo Dorje himself did not like being great and impressive, or using his power, or trying to increase the influence of his sect, or to increase the influence and prosperity of the monasteries underneath him. He didn't like that at all. Not only that, he did whatever he could to prevent any of that from occurring. And so if we want to point to it, if I just say this like that, if it doesn't help to just say that's how it was, I have to describe it in detail. So I'd like to take this opportunity to discuss the relations between the country of Zhang and the Karmapa, and likewise, and the relation between the Ming Emperor primarily, as well as the other Chinese people with the Karmapa. So I thought I'd speak about that. So today I will first speak about the relations with Zhang. I will speak about the relations with the Ming Emperor and so forth in general. Okay. So what is this country of Zhang? Maybe you've heard of it, but probably most of you haven't heard of it, because you all are staying in India and Nepal and Bhutan. So you probably don't know much about what Zhang. If you've come from Tibet, you probably know a bit about it. But Zhang is during the time of the Tibetan emperors. And the old histories from that period mention the name Zhang. They spelled it, it's sometimes called Ao Zhang, Ao Zhang. They spelled it with different spellings. And so this history does come from the time of the Tibet. There are histories about it from the time of the Tibetan kings. So during that period, Zhang came under Tibetan control several times. In particular, the Tibetan Emperor Dusung Rinpoche, he was one of the kings or emperors of Tibet. If we looked at it, now there are different accounts of his birth year. According to the manuscripts in Dunhuang, so it's the caves in one area, and within that, they found many old Tibetan documents. And one of them, the Dusung Mangpo, was born in 676. The documents from the Tang Gyalpa give another date for him, but I don't need to go into too much detail about that. But anyways, Dusung Mangpo was one of the Tibetan emperors. He went to Zhang. He invaded Zhang and took power over Zhang. And so the place where he passed away was actually in Zhang. So that is the history about it. So there's from earlier times there was a connection between Zhang and Tibet. So when did the Zhang company, you'd call it a kingdom or a minor kingdom? It wasn't a big kingdom. So when it arose, it was somewhere around in the 7th or 8th centuries. It arose in the border regions between Tibet and China. So they had different dynasties, and when they exchanged the dynasties in Tibet, so with the Mongol Emperor Kublai Khan, so during the time of Kublai Khan, the Mongol Emperor, Yuan Emperor, he went to the place of Dali, which is in current Yuan. It's another kingdom. This is larger than Zhang. So at that point, that area surrendered to the Mongols, and a government was installed over Yunnan and Jiang. And so he gained the ability to give the governor over the Yunnan and the Jiang provinces. Then after the Yuan was the Ming dynasty. And so in 1381, during the Ming dynasty, the Ming armies invaded Yunnan. Once again, the Jiang surrendered to the Chinese, to the Ming emperors. And then the Ming emperor is that state or province. The Ming province was able to appoint a governor over that area. Later, so now the kings of Zhang were from where their clan was called Mu, and so Mu is actually the Chinese word for word. And so that name was given to them by the emperor. So before that, they were called the Wus. So before that, they weren't called by them. They had no clan name before then. Now, how did they make a connection with the Karmapa during the time of the 7th Karmapa, Chuda Gyatso? They first made a connection with the king of Zhang. So the king of Zhang made offerings to 7th Karmapa Chuda Gyatso and invited him to Zhang, but he was not able to actually go to Zhang. The 8th Karmapa Mikya Dorjide was also invited to Zhang, and the king who invited him was the 13th king of Zhang. His name, if I show this to you, if I show you a picture of the king of Zhang. He's the 13th king of Zhang. His name in Chinese is Mu Ding. It's called Mu Dang or Mu Ding. But his actual nationality was from the Nya family. So in the end, they talked about the Naki. They called the white Naki and the black Naki. Nyaka, white Nyaki, and the black Nyaki. So it's probably the white Nyaki is what we call the Baizu. The black one is what we call the Ngachi. But the white Nyak, in their own language, they called this king Aya Achu. But that's really strange. It's Aya Achu, right? But in their language, they called him, their local language, they called him Aya Achu. He was born, and the date of passing I've written down here. I don't need to read them. So he was enthroned on 1502. In 1502 or 1503, and so in that time period, he ascended to the throne. And at that time, he took care of these called Gyatang and Kam, but this time they're called Sharila. Shangali in Chinese. They call it Shangali in Chinese. But I think in English it probably is Shangri. So he took power over he had power over many regions of Kam as well. And so he's the one who invited Mikhe Dorje. So what is the way that Mikhe Dorje was invited? So Mikhe Dorje was enthroned as a Karmapa at the age of 7. So not long after he was enthroned, there was a Lama from Zhang called Lama Tashi, and he offered him a letter from the king of Zhang. So this was the first connection between Mikhe Dorje and the king of Zhang in this life. And then Mikhe Dorje was traveling through the areas of Kam. He visited Karma Monastery and Kampo Nenang and the seats of Dusim Khenpa. And at that time, the king of Zhang invited him, saying, "Please come to Zhang." And so someone came offering this aspiration, and when that person came, Mikhe Dorje agreed to go. And he eventually he came to the place called Gyatang, which, as I said before, which is in the present-day province of Shangri in the province of Yunnan. And then on 1516, on the third day of the Vesak month, he went to Zhang. And when he arrived in Zhang, then it's happened, there was an elephant within the ranks of the escort come to welcome them. He had been tied down, but the king broke the rope, came to the encampment to the Karmapa's pet, and without anyone telling he came to the Karmapa and automatically or immediately bowed his head. And then the elephants do something to show respect. They hold their trunk up like this, right? So he did that. And when he did that, everyone is surprised. And so everyone is amazed at this. And so when Mikhe Dorje came arrived in Zhang, 10,000 soldiers came to welcome and escort them. And so they came to the palace of the king of Zhang in a place called Satam. And they set up camp there near the Satam palace. So there's quite a bit more to say about the Zhang, the king of Zhang. So there's more to say about him I'd like to show you. The palace of the king of Zhang is, even to this day, is still really beautiful and really well decorated. There's the Forbidden City, the palace of the Forbidden City in Beijing, and so this is like a small version of that. So in any case, this is the royal palace in Zhang, which is still with us. So Mikio Dorje was staying in the encampment near the palace, not in the palace itself, but in the encampment. So as he was staying in the encampment, the next day at dawn, the king of Zhang himself came to see the Karmapa. And the king of Zhang himself came in a litter. This is what we call a jumtre. So it's a litter that's carried by 3 or 4 people. So he came on such a litter. And the king's uncle and his younger brothers each rode their own elephant. And near them, there was also one more elephant who's led separately. And there are horses of different colors, red and white, and also with riders on them. They were holding banners and conchs and symbols, and most of them, they had a great procession to welcome him. And they came to the gate or to the door of Mikio Dorje's tent, and so the king dismounted at that place. And I think he was probably staying at the door of Mikio Dorje's tent, and he prostrated right there. Now at that time, in their language, Mikio Dorje didn't know their language. So there is a person called Laka Tsanyen. He was the translator. And they exchanged welcomes and tashidilek. And they also made some offerings to each other. And at that time, there was an elephant. There was another elephant that once again prostrated. And not only did it prostrate, it also trumpeted really loudly. I don't know how to make an elephant's voice, so I'm not going to try. If I try to imitate an elephant cat, if I go, I don't know what they say. They probably go like that, don't they? But they do have they do trumpet, right? And at that point, some person said, "Why is the elephant making such a racket?" So why is it? When asking why is the elephant trumpeting like that, the herdsman said, he's really happy that the Buddha has come to see him, and that's why he's trumpeting, because he's so happy. So at that point, there are many rainbows in the sky and rains of flowers and so forth, and many other auspicious signs. Then from that time, he spent a week in Zhang, and every day, in the evening, outside of the tent, or the equivalent, the king would prepare. And they made many offerings of music, and they're still there. And in Zhang, there are people who play there are old people who are in their 70s and 80s who play they play the traditional music, and they have this, and they say it's a really old form of music. And so this is considered as one of the by the World Heritage Organization, considered as one of the cultural treasures of the world. So that's probably the type of music that they played around the edges of the encampment. And then at that time, the king, Mikio Dorje gave the king statues of the Buddha and the 7th Karmapa, the Avatamsaka Sutra in Chinese, relics of the Buddhas, and also horses that he brought with him from Tibet. And so he made these gifts to the king. And then the Karmapa was escorted by the attendant. So the Karmapa, as I mentioned before, was in a litter, and he was brought into the palace. And the king himself, so the 3 different gates, there are 3 gates. So the king came down to the middle gate and offered him a khatam. So at that time, there also, among the welcome party, there were many Chinese monks with musical instruments, and there was also a huge drum that needed 16 people to play it. And so they said that they actually that they played that drum, as it's described in the histories. And Mikio Dorje went into the palace, and then Mikio Dorje was put on a golden throne in the palace, and all the other people were placed on thrones, or in the Chinese tradition, they had wooden chairs like that's in the Chinese style, and then the tea was served, and at the same time, the king made offerings of 100 offerings of silks and so forth. And now the king had three queens, and the three queens gave their own jewelry. They took off their jewelry and offered it to the Karmapa, and they took the Bodhisattva vows. So after that event was over, then the king escorted the Karmapa back to the Tibet, back to the encampment, sorry. And then the next day, he was once again in the same way invited to the palace. And at that point, what the king said, at that point, Zhang was waging war against many areas in Tibet and taking control of them. And so the lamas and ministers had made the request to Mekya Dorje. And for this reason, when speaking with the Mekya Dorje, then the king of Zhang agreed not to wage war against Tibet for 13 years. And for 10 years, he would send 500 people to become monks in central Tibet. So this is another promise he made. And he also promised to build 100 areas in their region. And so also at that time, according to the hope of the king of Zhang at that point was that the Gyalwang Karmapa would stay in Zhang permanently. And please be my guru, or be my object of reverence. But Mekya Dorje did not agree and went back to Tibet. He did not agree to spend a long time in Zhang. And so at that time, Mekya Dorje spent 1 week in Satam. So generally, the Zhang kings had not previously had faith in Buddhism because they had their own faith. They had their own, similar to the Buddha tradition, their own traditions that were similar to previous Buddha, and they would make offerings and sacrifice animals to the deities. But from that time on, the king gained unshakable faith in Buddhism, in particular in the Karma Kagyu teachings. And he became a very significant sponsor of the Karma Kagyu teachings. And the 10th Karmapa, Chögyam Dorje, when there was a great war in central Tibet, and Chögyam Dorje was unable to stay in central Tibet, Chögyam Dorje went through Kham and eventually came to Zhang and spent a long time in the kingdom of Zhang. If there hadn't been a place such as Zhang to Chögyam Dorje to go to, then at that time, then probably you can wonder whether the Karmapa would have survived a situation with so much conflict and war. And so for at that time, the king of Zhang and the people of Zhang, in terms of the Karma Kagyu history, are extremely kind to us. They're like our refuge that we could go to during the time of difficulties, and a place that we could put them. So that was Zhang at that time. And so it's a very great kindness for the Karma Kagyu. So Mekya Dorje spent a week in Zhang, and then when he was returning to Tibet, the king and the army escorted him. And they said, and Mekya Dorje said that after 7 years he would return to Zhang, but he was probably unable to return. But later, for the 10th Karmapa to spend a long time Chun Dorje was able to spend a long time, and this is probably the reason. The fact that Mikyo Dorje had made the promise to return is the reason why the Karmapa Chun Dorje was able to spend a long time in Zhang, as it is said. And then, so the king of Zhang, as he said, he sent 500 monks per year, and he made offerings every year, and he did as he had promised. And there are lists of the offerings that he made every year in the histories. And so then Mikyo Dorje went.
장근규 당부 슈서르디 파지 칸상고 인사를 섬섬도 파르코사도 과거에나 한번 어디 간다 슈들이야 안 장근규 슈서르디 파지 칸상고 고바들이야 슈면로 섬섬도 다 이면에 치수 다 소부 디 고시칸 그 마게 안다 디디 상물로 토르체 칸상고 고바들 상물로 토르체 요마레 다 드네르지 다 디균선 된 나간다 까마바 미규도지당 에너지 장기 예비 버로리아 데버럽 중단으로 중로로다 데르지 롬스 쉬비미나 데르지.
So that is the, in brief, the connection between the king of Zhang and so forth. So tomorrow what I will speak about, the Gyeong Karmapa, I'll speak about the relations between the Ming emperors and the Gyeong Karmapas. And the reason to explain this is that it's not just that I merely want to speak about it. It's that Mikyo Dorje was invited by the Ming Emperor Zhengde. And so what was the reason why the Ming Emperor invited Mikyo Dorje? Well, with that, if we look at the reasons for that, then we probably have to speak about it from the time of the fifth Karmapa, Daishin Shekpa. From that point, that there's the relations between the Karmapas and the Ming dynasty began. And so from his time on until the time of the ninth Karmapa, there were relations between the Ming emperors and the kings. And so I think we have no choice but to talk about it from the time of the fifth Karmapa, Daishin Shekpa. So we have to discuss how did there develop a connection between the Karmapa and the Ming emperors, in particular, the connection with the Chinese people. So I think it's probably good for us to describe that. And then after that, the eighth Karmapa was invited by the eighth Karmapa was invited by the Ming emperors. And so whether he went or not, you will learn tomorrow. So I'll speak about that tomorrow. So that is enough for today. So now we'll recite, have the closing prayers.
Karma, Jisu Kendo Minje